Hello everybody and welcome back to another watercolor painting tutorial. I'm going to be showing you today a really neat technique that makes painting pine trees over like a large span or a large canvas much easier, and I discovered this technique while painting dozens of these wood slices for markets where I had to cover like I said, dozens of them in these pine trees, and it was becoming really tedious to do them individually like I usually do. And I wanted to do one of those infomercial things where, you know, they're like trying to do something and they get really frustrated and they throw the item, and then this solution comes along and they're like, voila, it's amazing, it works. But I'm not gonna do that. So anyways, you want to start with either a watercolor piece of paper, which is probably what you have, or if you have like because this is just a cut piece of wood with a watercolor medium painted over it, which lets me paint watercolor on wood, but that is by no means necessary to paint this technique. I'm just doing this because I have to cover these wood slices anyways in designs, so this just lets me hit two birds with one stone. So I'm gonna just do a nice close-up here so you could see exactly what I'm doing. We're gonna start off with a bigger brush. So I'm using my size A Grumbacher, linked in the description, and you can choose, you know, whatever colors that you want, but I'm gonna be going with a blue. So I'm just taking a nice deep blue that I have. Maybe I can pop that in there so you can see sort of what's going on. And I'm mixing it with a little bit of black. So I have this nice deep blue. I'm gonna water it down just a tad because we're gonna be doing 3 layers here. Now, the technique to doing this is, how do I explain this? So what I would do before, I'm gonna just quickly show you what I would do before on a smaller scale here, is I would just, you know, paint a tree, like paint a line like this, and then paint the details of the tree, like so. And then I would paint another line and paint the details of that tree. And then I would paint another line and paint the details of that tree. And then I'd have to go back and fill in the gaps and paint another line up with more. You see how tedious that can become if you're doing that over a really long distance? Well, what we're gonna do now is you just take your color and you basically just fill in the bottom portion entirely with this color, like solid. And then right where you kind of want the tops of your trees to be, you flick with your paintbrush these like triangular shapes, and that's very easy to do. You basically just apply pressure with your paintbrush in the bottom, and then as you lift off your paintbrush, it creates these these pointy shapes upwards. And you just kind of do that until you've covered the entire portion of whatever you want to cover. Now, don't worry, this is not the final product. These are not our pine trees. No. Don't think that, because that would just be stooping. I mean, you know what? This could work in a situation where you're covering a huge distance and details really don't matter, but no. This is just laying the groundwork and making the whole process much easier. And obviously you want to work a little bit faster than I'm working right now because you don't want it to dry. And now we're just going to go over every single peak, extend it just a tiny bit with a thinner paintbrush, and then add those horizontal lines across that point and run them downwards. And as we do that with every single little cone shape thing that we painted, it starts to look like a bunch of pine trees just peaking. And we did that with very little effort. very little work. But the key thing I would say is really when you're painting those points to make sure they're really pointed at the top. So you can do the exact same thing that we did when we were painting these peaks, I guess I'll call them, is you apply pressure at the bottom, and as you lift off your paintbrush and lift off that pressure, it creates this beautiful, very thin point at the top. Isn't that gorgeous? When I just kind of discovered this on my own, because I was like, this is gonna take me forever if I have to do every single one individually. And that's what I was doing. That's what I've been doing for years and years and years in paintings. And it takes so much more time. And honestly, this even looks nicer because you don't have these. Sometimes when you have too many details in a small space, it makes it look very cluttered rather than detailed. So this is, I think, a really great solution to that. And see what I mean? You have to work quickly because your background starts drying before you get to the last few details. And we don't want that. There we go. Sorry about my voice. I was unwell for a week and I'm finally getting my voice back. So anyways, I am just going over all of this one more time because this started drying and it was looking, I was gonna do that cauliflower thing. All right, that's pretty neat. I'll kind of go back. Like we just covered a really large portion quite quickly with this technique. So I am going to let this dry and then we'll come back and continue on because I'll show you the finished painting, what I'm doing with this particular design. So while that one is drying, I know this is a bit random, but we haven't skipped any steps here. I'm just doing another one. So I'm not wasting time, just waiting for it to dry. I don't want to use, like usually I use a hair dryer on my watercolor paper to speed up the drying time, but I don't know how that would react on wood, so I'm not gonna take the risk considering I have only a few wood slices. I mean, I have a plethora of wood, like logs to choose from in my forest because that's where these came from. However, my lovely neighbor is the one that cuts them for me into slices, and I don't want to bother him any more than I already do. So that's why I'm just trying to use the ones that I have. I love this technique. I really do. It makes painting pine trees, it just gives me like this renewed passion for painting pine trees. So if anything, this just gives you a little more practice or viewage of how to do this technique while I'm waiting for my original one to dry. So what we're going to do now is basically the same thing, but it's going to be overlapping and it's going to be darker. So I'm taking that same blue that I used before, which by the way, the blue does not matter. Like it can be any blue that you want to use. It can be any green, it can be any yellow. You can paint your pine trees orange for all I care. The color does not matter. It's whatever you make it. And I'm only stressing that because I get asked in so many videos, like, what's the exact name of the color you're using? I don't know. I threw out the name card a long time ago. Anyways, I've got my more potent color here. You can either add more black to make it darker, or you can just take a lot more pigment and less water, and that will also make it darker than the previous layer. But the point is that you want to make it darker than your first layer. So I'm going to be overlapping mine diagonally like so. So we're going to do the exact same thing where we just lay on a solid amount for the base, and then we just strike our paintbrush upwards so that it ends in a point. Like so. I like that. So then I switch to my more fine brush, my detail brush. This is my size 1 by Winsor & Newton. I don't actually use this brush too often. I don't know why. Usually when I think I know why. I can achieve the details that I need with my, size 14 Grumbacher because it has a really nice pointed tip. So when I need really fine details, I'm going to go for my size quadruple 0 to achieve those details that I can't with the pointed tip of my bigger one. And that's why I don't use this one too often. But I started using this one a lot more while painting these wood slices because the size quadruple 0, unfortunately, but it comes inherent with the fact that it's like a very fine detail brush. The quadruple 0 doesn't have long bristles, and so it doesn't hold as much water and as much pigment. So you have to keep dipping your paintbrush back in the pigment while you're painting, which gets a bit tedious, especially when you want to do long strokes, like long blades of grass, or, when you are painting individual pine trees and you just want to do that one long stroke. It really doesn't allow for that, and sometimes disrupts your detail work that is supposed to be a continuous line. So that is why I typically why I opted for this one, because it's longer and it has more volume to the brush, while still giving me the versatility to do very fine lines, but also that longer brush and that thicker brush gives me the option to lay a lot of paint on canvas because it can hold more. That was a very long explanation, but I hope that it doesn't matter. I'm painting. Half the time I don't know what I'm saying in these videos. When I rewatch my videos sometimes, just like weeks or months later, and I'm actually listening to myself talking, I'm like, what was I saying? What is coming out of my mouth right now? So I don't blame you guys if you're confused. Look at that. I love that. I love how that looks. It's so effortless too. It really is, this technique. Like, anybody can do it if you have a fine hand and a fine brush. So just like the first layer, we are going to let this completely dry before we move on to our final layer. All right, so I think that our second layer is dry there. Now what we're gonna do is our third layer. So again, we're taking that same blue, but this time I am adding a lot of black. Like, I want to make it nice and dark. And you can basically position your layers wherever you want. Like, they don't have to be overlapping every single one. Like, I could paint this one kind of going this way. I could paint it going this way. But I do want to cover this larger gap here. So I'm just going to paint my third layer overlapping the second. And again, we're doing the exact same technique. If you didn't already get that. Okay, actually I'm gonna extend this onto the other side because it looked a little bit funny the way it ended there. Like that. And then again, we're going in. And it's perfect because those points that we painted with the larger brush are already tapered, so we don't have to widen our painting as we move. I mean, we do, but in a way that it just covers the taper, because when you paint a pine tree individually, you have to really control for the entire tree all the way down. You don't have any sort of guide or stencil or like any shape to go off of. You just have to kind of come up with it and fill it in as you go. Whereas this, you already have a template almost that you can follow all the way down. Okay, and we have our third layer. Now, you can keep going with these layers for as long as you want. I might paint a fourth one that's just completely black, which I thought my third layer was going to be, but apparently not. Or you can stop there, it's totally up to you. But let me know what you think of this technique, if it's easier for you, if it's as much of a revelation as it was for me. Yeah, let me know in the comments. I would really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, please give this video a thumbs up. It helps me grow my channel. And of course, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.